Hi, I'm Chvátal, the chairman of TAMUS, and this presentation is about the Jewish synagogues in small villages in the Czech kingdom. There are different shape of Jewish quarters in the villages. It could be independent Jewish quarter with own marketplace, with the synagogue usually. It could be independent street. It could be also the houses built in the central part of the village without own marketplace, without own independent street, etc. One of very good preserved synagogues is the synagogue in Gardenia, built in 1850s. Up to the World War II, it was in use, and during the World War II, it was changed to a Christian church. And in the use as a Christian church, it survived up to the end of 20th century. After 2000, it was bought by the municipality, and then long time was being repaired, restored. Now it is the originally preserved synagogue buildings, including the interior and including the mikveh in the basement. Only partly is preserved the synagogue in Prostibor. It was in use up to end of 19th century, and later it was rebuilt to the hearse shed. One arch window is preserved in the facade. The synagogue in Pivana was built in 19th century, and it was in use up to Second World War. After war, it was totally abandoned, damaged, used as a workshop. A few years ago, it was bought by private owner, and it is now being rebuilt to a living house. So the building is preserved, but the traces of use as a synagogue are being erased. Former synagogue in Tusla was completely rebuilt, and only 2 windows are preserved up today. In this old medieval village of Talitza was the last synagogue in 19th century, and in later 19th century, in about 1890, this synagogue was destroyed after a big fire, and this wall is the last rest of the village synagogue of Talitza. Here was an old synagogue in Porshaw, built probably in the Baroque era in 18th century. This synagogue was rebuilt in 19th century and many times repaired and restored, and it was in use up to First World War. The whole village was destroyed in the communist era, and in its place are now only shrubs and ruins of former big and important village. The synagogue was quite big, and in its upper floor was the main prayer room, and in its first floor was a flat of rabbi and Jewish school. New synagogue in Tachov was built after the big fire of Jewish Street in 1911, when also the old synagogue was destroyed. After 1.5 years was built the new synagogue made by the well-known architect Alfred Grote. Roots of his family were from Tachov. The new synagogue was not only the prayer building, but in connection to it what was built also the rabbi house with Jewish school and with 2 flats. The synagogue was destroyed by Nazis in 1938, and up to date only the rabbi house is preserved. Many of the village synagogue buildings survived the war, but they were destroyed in the communist leadership up to 1980s, and they were destroyed very short time before the end of the communist era. For example, the synagogues in Spirov. The synagogue was a Baroque building with very original shape, and it was destroyed in 1970s. The synagogue in Nečtiny was destroyed in 1989, and the synagogue in Poběžovice, Ronsberg in German, was destroyed in 1970s. Many of destroyed village synagogues in the western Bohemia are saved only in photographs, and many of those photographs are in the permanent exhibition in the Museum of Shimon Adler in Dobrá voda, Good Wasser, near Herkmanitz, on the southwest border area, near the German border. And our society designated this exhibition in 2019, and except many photographs of former synagogue buildings, there are also 4 models, 3D models of non-existing synagogues. So visitors have possibility to see the synagogue buildings. They don't exist anymore. Now we are in the former Jewish street in Dlouhý Újezd, Langendorflass in German. And the houses in this street are partly preserved, partly rebuilt. The synagogue was in the back part of the street in this area, and it was destroyed before World War II. The synagogue was a small building. A half of the house was a flat, and the second half was the synagogue. Now part of the former Jewish street is in the private garden, and from the synagogue only the stone basement is preserved. Some synagogue building was restored by its owner or by volunteers after 2010. For example, the synagogue in Bezdružice, Veseritz in German, was restored, partly restored by its owner. The synagogue in Podmokli near Sušice is being restored by its new owner. The synagogue in Žatec, north for Plzen, was restored by volunteers. And the synagogue in Čkyně, South Bohemia, was restored by local volunteers in cooperation with descendants of Jewish families from Čkyně living now in United States. The synagogue was like a miracle, and it is now in very good condition. The synagogue in Čkyně was consecrated in 2013 after a long restoration. One of the stories with happy end is the old synagogue in Plzen. It was built in 1850s, then for many years abandoned, and restored in 2013 with installation of the new permanent exhibition of Jewish history in this region made by our society. Now the synagogue is active synagogue of the Jewish community of Plzen. Thank you for your attention.